Welcome back to StoryArcs podcast and YouTube videos. This is going to be our second episode here with myself, Andrew, and Gavin. And we are going to cover Daredevil today with the Born Again storyline. Wanted to kind of give a little bit of a different type of comic, a little bit of a different feel of comic to the Marvels that we covered in the first episode. So the Born Again storyline, the one that we looked at the trade paperback. So the trade paperback actually includes an extra story at the beginning, or an extra issue at the beginning, and then kind of a almost an epilogue, two issues at the end. They're not officially part of the Born Again storyline, but it's been the trade paperback since whenever the original trade paperback came out. So um, the original story came out in 1986, and it was issues 226 is where the trade paperback starts, and it finishes at 233. So this is a little bit different than what we covered with Marvels. Marvels, I know we covered that it was mostly self-contained. The Marvels referenced a lot of other material, referenced a lot of Golden Age and Silver Age material, but this is just straight up a story that was lifted from ongoing comics that you would have been buying off the rack in 1986. Neither one of us were born in 1986, which is interesting, I guess, to go back and read something from before our time. And yeah, so we're just gonna give you that main overview. I'll try to avoid too many spoilery parts. I think the way we have things set up, we don't get too much into spoilers. Um, so, Gavin, did you have anything before we go jump into our summaries, or
I think yeah, opened it well. Let's get right into it. Talking about what this whole theme of the story was about in this one because it was pretty heavy overall.
yep? So we get a lot of the '80s feel here, and a lot of the. I mean, it's Frank Miller. So we're written by Frank Miller, art by Dave Mazzucchelli. Hope I do not mess that up. Um, if I do, I'm sure somebody will correct me. Letters by Joe Rosen, and colorist was Max Shield. And I don't think that we're going to get too much into the art. The art is good, as solid. I will say for me, the art didn't change much of the story for me. I've not read a ton of Daredevil comics, so it's hard for me to say that you know this is a definitive artist or this is not a definitive artist. I know that uh, Frank Miller actually did art off and on with this book and with other books. Sometimes he's a writer, sometimes he's an artist. Major influence in comics in the long term. But I think in this instance, the art is very solid, very good. We'll get into some of the imagery of it, but I don't think that there was. I don't think there's anything here that deviates from what I would call like the style of the time enough that it's super relevant to what you're getting yourself into. It's not going to surprise any reader or anything like that. It's not going to put anybody off. I don't think so. Uh, so yeah, the summary: Daredevil, and this is again the Frank Miller era. Daredevil is often tragic, and I think uh, this is the height of said tragedy. And so he really, in the basic story, he loses everything. Um, Kingpin has that personal vendetta against him. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like this is really where that's fully established. I know that appears in his stories prior to this, but I feel like this is really where it reaches its peak um, with that vendetta. Karen Page, who is Daredevil's ex-girlfriend, sells his identity for drug money, and he he gets beaten down to the point where he basically needs to be rescued. He doesn't have anything left. Comes back from the brink, and of course, as it is a superhero story, he does succeed, and then goes on to ruin Kingpin's rep, I think, by the end of it. So hopefully not too spoilery. Obviously, the purpose of our podcast is to give you a little bit of a overview and an introduction. We're not trying to tell you the whole story, but it's definitely worth a read. Um, so
Yep.
we'll move on to talk about it here. Unless you had anything to add for the summary, I'll
Yeah,
let you start with talk about it. So
for sure. That was well done. Yeah, I think on the art style, I guess I was going to touch a bit because uh, I'm trying to think back to Marvels, but what I was noticing in this one for sure are some of the what do you call the the kapow, the action words to things. Starts with the A, right? I don't know, but yeah, I noticed those kind of a lot overall in this comic. I don't know if you thought that stood out over others. I always just thought that's interesting. The sounds that the artists, illustrators, whatever, have to kind of make up to kind of put you there. You know what I mean? When you don't have the sound effects and all that, that's all you really have, and it's kind of um, and it definitely wasn't overdone. But I think I can appreciate it knowing that this is all they had. That you can really use your imagination to it. So um,
I think definitely contrast, like I said, yeah, definitely contrast like that hyper realistic uh, style that we had from Alex Ross and the Marvels. Like it's
right.
yeah, it's more of the classic comic style. Uh yeah, was that you feel like that was something you liked overall?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Just since we're like two comics into it, but I thought it was what I mean, in the scenes where it was the action. You know what I mean. They were shooting the machine gun, whatever. I thought it's appropriate. You know what I mean. I didn't think it was overdone or anything. Like it, stood out to me just because what I mean. The colors, everything. It's and I mean like it should. I think. You know what I mean. Just for those types of things, but yeah, your summary overall, what I mean, short and sweet. I think that what I mean did explain what was going on. And overall, yeah, I know the next section generally the significance of it because I feel like what I really grabbed from it is what I mean, kind of the influence that Kingpin was able to throw around, how powerful that was. What I mean, him, one of the main scenes when he was walking out of his boss's office and the janitor threatens him that Kingpin's watching, and they kind of did that thing all throughout. The nurse, this nurse that was, she was in there a lot, kind of getting people left and right, and what I mean, you could tell she was in Kingpin's pocket, and just what I mean, someone whenever someone's going to the hospital, and then she can get in there and like be choking someone in their hospital bed. It's that overarching what I mean influence is really strong. I mean, he blows up his house. He gets him removed from his law thing like really early. That was probably the first I don't know chapter or so. So I think that's what I mean. Really, the significance of Kingpin's just whole role with that, and how Daredevil wasn't as somewhat helpless to it, especially his girlfriend just being the one to kind of ignite that. It's just really out of his, what I mean, as a hero, a superhero, right? Things are out of his hands for being a superhero. He's not really able to stop any of this. So overall, that's
Yeah,
my yeah.
I think you get a lot of when it comes to likes and dislikes, for me, it's ongoing, so it feels more like a real comic book in a way. Like I, I don't know if this is so much alike, but I will say as a warning, like you're gonna have to look some things up if you really want to understand everything in the comic,
Oh yeah.
because you're not gonna know. There's some reference to past events. There's some reference to like ongoing things in the comic. Um, the and of course, the tie-in of Daredevil is always like he's relatable, right? Like he's not a god. He's not destroying cosmic threats. Like
Yeah.
he's got enhanced senses, but he's on the ground and he's working like in that real world that that Marvel brings, that sometimes I think it other comics, and not necessarily just DC, but sometimes other comics are not able to kind of bring to life. when you're talking about superheroes. Like Daredevil is that character. He's a very human character. He messes up. Um, and then yeah, you get into the cultural significance, like what you're talking about, Kingpin. Oh man, Kingpin, he's just an '80s villain, you know? Like he's just bad and he's a bully and
He
there's
loves
nothing
it.
you can do about it. And you gotta keep pushing and eventually, find his weak spot and exploit it or just survive essentially. I think that was um, I'm not a big '80s movie guy, but like yeah, Kingpin, I think he speaks to that to the and in the other way, like he's kind of that '80s greed is good, right? But he's portrayed as the bad guy in this character, and
Yeah.
sometimes in the '80s you get that Reagan era of oh no, it's good to get all the money you can. It's good to spend money on these things and stuff like that. And Kingpin is kind of
Oh yeah.
that twisted a little bit.
Right. You can see how people, yeah, might envy him, his position and power and influence, right? Yeah, like might want that part, but yeah, overall, his character, I did, like it too. Overall, just was what, like you said, he was a good villain. You know what I mean? He's trying to accomplish the right things, and he has a reason, right? He's trying to get money and power. You know what I mean? Some villains just like chaos for the sake of chaos, and you know what I mean. What are you gonna do about that? But he's calculated.
Yeah, I think Kingpin also you get a little bit in the last couple issues, which are technically not part of the Born Again story arc. Again, in the trade paperback, so we're talking about them. I think you get a little bit of that Kingpin as the politician comes out. And we talked about before we started the show. There's some scenes where he's literally wrapping himself in the flag, talking to Nuke, who is a soldier archetype, and yeah, like it's not it's not as it's not as heavy handed as that sounds. Like reading it off the page, it's not as heavy handed I feel as it could be
Mm.
with comics and those messages sometimes. But to say that this is one of those stories you and one of those bits like if you ever hear anybody say that comics are so political now or I don't want politics in my comics, like then you haven't actually been paying attention to comics. They've been political since
Always
the
been that
jump.
way. Yeah.
So I mean literally Captain America's first appearance, he's punching Hitler in the face. I mean, yeah, like that you nowadays we don't think of that as political, but at the time, like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I'm sure there were some people that didn't feel that way. So, because that was when was Captain America's first issue? Like 1940, like it was before we were in the war, wasn't it? Or right after we were in the war? Like it was, there was still some
Mm-hmm.
apologists for the Nazis before we got into World War II. And I mean, there's still apologists for the Nazis now, but
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a big country.
Uh, yeah. So let's touch on our next section here, that kind of through our lens. Um, you get a lot of that kind of dark for dark's sake. Um, for me, this is very much that view of big cities that Midwestern people, where I came from, have that view of big cities. Like I can imagine my dad, who of course would have been my age in the '80s, uh, coming and telling me about, we don't. He would have no desire to go to New York, like right, like
Oh
he
yeah.
doesn't want to
Big,
be around that. Yeah,
scary. You know what I mean? The fact
yeah,
they saw her apartment getting broken into. It's like they made it just feel dangerous, like all around,
yeah.
right?
And I mean, I didn't live in New York in the '80s, so I don't know. I don't know what that actually was like, but yeah, it very much feels like the viewpoint that was then adopted by people that come from where I come from, in the Middle West in the '90s. That viewpoint of cities that still lingers a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now I live on the outsides of a, I don't know, medium city. Indianapolis is big enough, but yeah, that don't go down a dark alley. There's drugs everywhere. There's everything going on. Like, Hell's Kitchen is still Hell's Kitchen, which I'm not really sure what Hell's Kitchen was like in the 80s, but
Yeah.
being in Manhattan, it doesn't seem like by that time it would have been as bad as some of the other places probably in New York, but who knows. Um, and then I don't know if you want to, I'll let you talk about through your lens, but I would say that most people from my background would not have noticed anything odd uh from that characterization from 1986. Like I don't think there would have been anything that stood out as wrong um for people with my background. Uh so I
Hmm.
don't know if there was anything in the story that you felt like was different from your background. Although I'd say what suburban Chicago, I don't know that there's a whole lot that would have changed your view. I'm sure your viewpoint was would you say your viewpoint would of big cities would kind of be the same from
I mean, like with how scary maybe they seem to make it.
yeah, like yeah, this is we're getting into some personal conversation here because I don't think I've ever asked like, did your mom ever like tell you not to go into certain parts of the Chicago or
I mean, we never really lived, you know what I mean, that close. I mean,
yeah,
of course, I can go down and, you know what I mean, I'm going down for work and all that, but it's never been like, right, because notorious, I don't know, south side of Chicago. I mean, even for work, I've never had any real reason to go there, but no, I can't say, you know what I mean, my mom's never said to stay away from there in particular because she, probably hasn't even been there herself. So, yeah, I don't know. Big cities, they do have, you know what I mean, still their zones like that when you talk to people, you know what I mean? There still are those that, are notorious for a reason, right? They're on the
yeah,
news, they've got those spots. I've known plenty of people that have their cars broken into. I don't think their whole place, you know what I mean, like was shown in this one. But of course, yeah. I mean, I feel like the '80s it was definitely a bit scarier of times, and maybe I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to say things maybe weren't as separated as they are now. Even really, you know what I mean? When you really think of the gentrification and stuff, it's like there are safer spots of this that where people know in the city where you're not going to have any problems, right? I don't know if that was as much the case back then, right? Because if Hell's Kitchen is next to Manhattan or something, you know what I mean? Manhattan is not so much known for that, but New York is wild overall. So,
yeah. I mean, again, we're not we're giving you an overview, so I won't spend too much more on the details of that stuff. We're not quite the research monsters that other comic book podcasts are. But
not yet.
yeah, yeah, not yet. Maybe we'll see how we evolve here if people want us to get into more of the details of everything. But I think mostly we're here for the overview. So, um, yeah, I mean, if you like that dark for dark's sake, like this is definitely a good one to pick up. And I mean, it's like I said, it's quintessential. So connections to classic lit or other literature. Obviously, it's called Born Again. There's a lot of Christian imagery. The cover for the trade paperback and the cover for different issues references Christian paintings, Christian imagery again. Stained glass window is literally in the background of the cover for the trade paperback. So you're getting you're getting that Catholic side of Daredevil. That's always been a side of Daredevil, to my knowledge. Or at least from this era, it's always been side of Daredevil. It's referenced a lot in the movie or in the TV shows. The TV show pulls a lot of pieces from the story for the different storylines that go through like season 2 and 3. So you get Christ images of Daredevil when he's at the breaking point and laying on the ground, laying in his bed. I think at that point, his this is the instance. There's the nun, and there's some Madonna imagery for the nun. I won't get into that in detail, just in case. I mean, it's kind of a spoiler for Daredevil if you want to get in if we get too far into that with the nun. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot. that's a really an obvious preference. Like, it's not strictly a Christ story. It's not strictly a savior story. It's a little bit. It's kind of a rebirth. You got to break everything down to get to it. There's a lot of confessions. People confess a lot in here. Again,
Gotcha.
I think that's pretty fairly typical Daredevil fare from the Frank Miller era, um, and from lots of different eras of Daredevil. So next section, what the hell was that? So I can't remember I can't remember where you came down here. For
Well,
me, there is so much Kingpin working out art. Just he does all of his scheming, I guess, while in the gym, and he doesn't wear a shirt. Uh, it seems like an odd art choice to me. There's one image in particular that just looks messed up, like the proportions seem kind of weird, like his stomach is like covering part of his chest, and I don't know. To my knowledge, there's not actually a person that is as big as Kingpin, but Kingpin is supposed to be a legitimate, like just a regular person. So it's hard to say that the art's bad. It's just weird. It's just not, it's just not my taste, I guess. Uh, it doesn't seem. I mean, I guess it does establish a little bit of that, like Kingpin is strong because he works out all the time, right? Like he's not, he comes by his strength honestly, but he's. I mean, you could have done a lot of those scenes differently. He could have been doing a lot of different things, or one working out scene. It didn't have to be every single time that he was scheming like he's working out. And I don't know if that persists throughout the Frank Miller era, throughout the uh, Mazzucchelli artist era of Daredevil, but
I just know it's set up for a great tidy whitey fight scene, with Daredevil after that. Because yeah, he's got his. I know it's a funny looking fight because yeah, he looks like a wrestler or something. Oh, it's
yeah,
great.
it's I don't know. Did you have anything? Did you have a different one for what the hell?
Yeah, I know before whatever I had made mine, but I'm gonna say mine's on the scene towards the end. Dealing well when Iron Man and Thor make their short appearance. It's kind of like they help subdue Nuke or initially, but then but then they like kind of just leave him in the hands of the guards, and then they can't control him. It's like wouldn't you want him back in a protected some kind of facility? It's like, oh, get him, and then he just kind of breaks out from the guards that are protecting him again. It's just a very strange in the storyline for like the 1 to 2 frames that they're in there. I kind of feel
I
like they're just thrown in.
I mean, it's a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit forced, but I don't know. That's always tough in Marvel because there's sometimes that I really appreciate that like in Marvel or different stories like okay, if somebody's blowing up Hell's Kitchen, right? If somebody's shooting wildly in Hell's Kitchen,
Yeah,
like you would hope that the Avengers or somebody else would be like,
right.
"Hey, we want, if we're not doing anything, let's go see what's going on over here." But yeah, it's very quick. I will say I like that it's not a complete rescue. Like they don't just fix the story. It's not a Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
Uh,
I just wouldn't mind seeing,
probably
Thor's
I butcher
hammer
that every I
is tough name.
Deus Ex Machina. I guess I'm terrible at it. Anyway, it's not quite that because they don't they don't wrap up the story with it. Like that doesn't say that doesn't fix the story. Like
Yeah.
Daredevil oh, is the one that does it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting cameo. That would have been really interesting if they did that in the Daredevil TV show. Like then, that would have blown people away. But I don't think they ever wanted to do that with the MCU stuff. They never really wanted to actually bring in actual MCU characters into those Netflix shows. So
Takes a little too
But
much effort.
rumor is Daredevil is coming to the MCU as an attorney at the very least, possibly as early as the Spider-Man movie. So we'll see how that turns out. I don't know.